Live from Radio Monterey on California's beautiful Central Coast, this is the Ringside Boxing Show. I'm your host, Dennis Taylor, inviting you to join me and my expert analysts, Travis Hartman, Rizwaan Zahid, and John J. Raspanti, today and every Sunday at ringsideboxingshow.com for the hottest, sweatiest boxing show on the West Coast. And don't forget to download TuneIn, our free app, so you can listen to us every Sunday on your smartphone. And now, from Studio 1A, it's the Ringside Boxing Show.
Hey, welcome to the Ringside Boxing Show. We are part of the Leave It in the Ring Boxing Network, and today's featured guest is a journalist who last year was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Nigel Collins was editor-publisher of the Ring magazine for many years, as well as Boxing Illustrated, Ring Almanac, KO, World Boxing, some other publications, and he's also the author of Boxing Babylon, which came out in 1990. He is currently a columnist for ESPN.com and Boxing News, and is a social media and content provider for ESPN2's Friday Night Fights. Nigel has been a boxing oracle for 45 years and has a very, very rich sense of boxing history, so we're looking forward to tapping into that today. He'll be coming up about halfway through the show, so stick around for that. And in just a few minutes, John Raspanti is going to be interviewing Stan the Man Martinyouk. Stan's a super lightweight, 16-2. He's got a fight coming up December 16th in Milwaukee. But right now, let's catch up on the week in boxing with our expert analyst. Travis Hartman is a professional boxer and boxing trainer from Osborne, Missouri, now living and training in West Palm Beach, Florida. Rizwaan Zahid is a boxing journalist from Toronto. John J. Raspanti is chief lead writer for MaxBoxing.com and DogHouseBoxing.com. Gentlemen, this is one of the busiest weekends of boxing that I can remember in a long time, and I'm going to throw you guys a few highlights, all right? And then I'm going to kind of get out of your way and let you pick your favorite topics and talk about them for the next 20 minutes. So here's the news. Joseph Parker decisioned Andy Ruiz yesterday in a battle of undefeated heavyweights, but I don't think he did a whole lot to make himself a marquee attraction. He wants Deontay Wilder next. Jamar Charlo knocked out Julian Williams and kind of acted like a jerk after the fight and said he's headed to 160, maybe to stalk Golovkin, but he also called out Canelo. Joshua-Mollina didn't make weight, didn't come close. Then got dominated and stopped in 8 rounds by Terrence Crawford. Gave it his all, but Crawford, man, what a talent he is. Says he wants Pacquiao next. Dillian Whyte won a really bruising split decision over Derek Chisora, another Fight of the Year candidate. Anthony Joshua demolished really non-competitive Eric Molina in 3 rounds, and then announced he's going to fight Klitschko on April 29th at Wembley Stadium. Might have 90,000 there. That's pretty exciting. Abner Mares, guy whose epitaph in boxing has been written a couple times, won his 4th world title by a split decision over Jesus Cuellar. That was an upset, and most wonder what the third judge was watching. Mares was pretty dominant in that one. And a couple other things outside the ring. Adrian Broner got court-ordered to pay $175,000 in damages to a woman whose sex tape he allegedly leaked online. Broner's defense, he says he has 3 phones, one for business, one for family, and one is his hoe phone. Someone hacked his hoe phone. The judge didn't buy it. Amir Khan's wife is in a feud with his family and said that they've never respected her or accepted her. For some reason, this apparently is going to become a TV reality show called Home with the Khans. Memo to Amir, that is not a good idea. And finally, Miguel Cotto is going to fight James Kirkland for some reason, and for another reason, it's going to be on pay-per-view. Man, guys, we got so much to talk about. Travis, what fires your rocket on that list? Are you there? Whoops. Hang on. Yeah, Travis, are you there?
Yeah. You guys know how much I love boxing. I'm always gushing after such a huge weekend of boxing, and it's so hard. It's like a buffet-style smorgasbord of boxing this weekend, especially because there were fights in New Zealand and Europe, so we had it literally all day on Saturday because for America, we had boxing afternoon, evening, night. I mean, it was amazing. I guess the one thing that I would like to just talk about real fast is, because I don't want to discredit Jamal Charlo, because he did act like kind of a jerk after his knockout. But being a professional fighter myself, I know that the intensity and the level of adrenaline is running is so high when you're in the ring. And I think what he did and what he said to J-Rock Williams after the inside the ring after the fight was just off of pure emotion. I mean, I don't want to take away from the kid, because if I'm right, I'm listening to the interview in the ring that he did apologize, for doing that. It doesn't take it away. I get that, but I just wanted to at least give him a little bit of leeway, because the adrenaline is so high right after such a big fight like that. And that fight was pretty heated in the interviews going up to that fight. And I'm talking about when Jermall Charlo knocked out Julian Williams in a pretty big upset, last night. So I just want to give him a little bit of leeway, and don't let the fans demonize him too badly, because, like I said, I think he's a good guy. I think that adrenaline's rushing, and I've said this before, that I'm not really a big fan of in-ring interviews, just because it's boxing. You're getting your brain rattled. You're in the middle of all this high adrenaline in front of 10, 15,000 people, and they're asking you these questions right away. I mean, your brain has to settle. You have to just settle down a little bit, and I think that he was, like I said, he wears his heart on his sleeve, and it was just out there a little bit. But congratulations. What a great win for Jermall Charlo. He called out Canelo Alvarez. I want to watch that. I would watch that fight. I don't know if I want to see him in the ring with Triple G, but I mean, all of us on here, John and Riz all know that Triple G is pretty legit, and I don't think anybody wants to fight him, and I don't want to see anybody get hurt either. But it would be a good fight if he wants to move up to 160. We'll see if he does or if he doesn't, but Jermall Charlo has a very bright future ahead of him, and I would gush over a Canelo Alvarez fight, and that would be Charlo's biggest payday. And I think after last night, I think he earned it, because when I was watching this build-up, I thought it was a 50-50 fight as well, and with Naseem Richardson and Julian Williams' corner, which is the old trainer of Bernard Hopkins, but Naseem Richardson was just like, guys, he's the next coming of this, division, blah, blah, blah. And I usually believe when Naseem Richardson says something, because he's usually right, but holy crap, if Naseem Richardson is right, then what do we talk about Jermall Charlo now? Because holy crap, he blitzed Williams out of there with a pretty devastating knockout in the 5th round.
Well, who wins Canelo? Riz, who wins Canelo Charlo?
That's interesting. I think Charlo is definitely more than a live underdog. This is by far the best of his career, best performance of his career, and I think we can all agree he's the better of the Charlo brothers. He just has stone cold knockout power, but he's also he seems like he's more well schooled. And unlike where a lot of the guys Canelo fights, he's not going to have a size advantage, because I think they pointed out yesterday, Charlo he's a guy who could easily be a middleweight. It's kind of surprising they'd still able to make 154.
Yeah.
So I think that's why he wants to move up, but there's big fights for him at 154. I wouldn't mind at all seeing him against Golovkin. I think he has a very good chance against Golovkin. You know how this works in the sport. You're only as good as your last fight. Golovkin showed a lot of holes in his last fight. That being said, a lot of the guys who go to England always got, the English fighters fighting at home is, they're totally different. Brook was different. Carl Froch, anytime he fought at home, the way he beat Butte was totally different. So, but I think he would have a very good chance against Triple G. The issue we might see now is all the politics that come into play. Are we going to see, a guy who just fought on Showtime, he's going to be able to fight Canelo on HBO, because that Canelo's not going to leave HBO anytime soon. It'll be the same thing with Triple G. So, I think the backup plan that they could make is, let's say Danny Jacobs doesn't end up fighting Triple G, and that falls out. I guess that's a backup plan, Charlo and Jacobs, because I'd still be happy to see that. But there's a lot of fights that that Charlo can be made. He just took out a guy who's an undefeated contender, and even if people favored him to win, no one thought he was going to win like this. He looked very, very good. And you know what? I am actually a fan of in-ring interviews, because they just had, that's the time you want to have those interviews, because they are the most rattled. It's more about TV friendly than worry about the fighter's safety. That's never been a primary concern of boxing, really. So, I think Charlo's he's in demand now, and I think it's hard to be in demand when both those divisions are pretty much run by Canelo and Triple G, and they're kind of going back and forth, and everyone is just extra. But he's made himself into a viable contender for either of those guys, and I would welcome him fighting either Triple G or Canelo.
John, what fired your rocket this week?
Well, I'm going to go off script a little bit, DT. Dennis, I really, a little. Chisora and Whyte was an incredible fight, but before that, my paisan, Frank Wise Guy Buglioni, was in a fight that was incredible. And it was like our guys, Gotti and Ward, It was
really?
back and forth. And it got no notice. And Buglioni was cut across his nose. Travis would love this. He was cut across his nose. He was cut over his eye. He was getting hit with just about every right hand. And I feel bad because since I'm getting old, I can't remember the name of the guy he's a cousin of Tyson Fury. I remember that, but the guy was undefeated. His nickname's the Hammer, but he was doing a number on Buglioni, and Buglioni just kept taking these punches, and he probably out of the first 7 rounds, he lost 6 of them. But he just kept coming and coming and coming and coming, and he finally knocked the guy down in the 11th round and stopped him in the 12th. I mean, it was for the British light heavyweight title, so it wasn't anything spectacular, but it sure was for Frank Buglioni, and the crowd was screaming and standing, and I mean, it was a great win for Frank Buglioni. If he had lost that fight, he lost a couple of them already. Every time he seemed to step up, he'd lose, and he's no great talent, but he's got the heart and the soul of a fighter that a lot of us love. The determination. There was no quit in the guy, and they were talking trash leading up to it. So that was a tremendous fight. And then the Chisora-Whyte fight was, man, I always talk about Dillian Whyte was going to blow Derek Chisora out, and you just never know about Derek Chisora, But he showed up yesterday, and he was on point, and he landed some hellacious shots, and so did Dillian Whyte, and they both stood up, and at one point it looked like the end of Rocky, when you remember they're just both kind of staggering, standing there looking at each other near the 11th to 12th round, and that was basically it. Both of them could barely move because they'd been hitting each other with so many hard punches. So that was incredible, and I agree with Travis, on a couple of things. Yesterday was just such a smorgasbord for boxing fans. I mean, I just watched so many fights and enjoyed it. And I'm going to say this about Charlo. I think if he's guilty of anything yesterday, he's guilty of maybe being a little sensitive. He felt disrespected. He was upset at J-Rock. And he, from what I read, they hugged after the fight. So as far as I'm concerned, that's a dead issue. And I sure hope he apologized a couple of times. I sure hope, in this day and age, people can be so harsh when somebody makes a mistake. Give the kid a break. He got a little emotional. He felt like he wasn't getting the respect he deserved. He knocks Julian-Williams out very impressively with a brilliant uppercut. As far as I'm concerned, that's that. Let him go. He's a good guy. His brother's a good guy, too. Let's move on. So that's what I got to say about it.
Travis, your old buddy Terrence Crawford, they should be dusting off a Hall of Fame chair for this guy. Man, is he good.
Hey. Oh, my gosh, guys. I'm a Midwestern kid, born and raised up near Kansas City, Missouri. So I've always been an advocate of Midwest boxing. And Terrence Crawford is right across the street at Omaha, Nebraska. I think it's an hour-and-a-half drive from where I grew up. So to see this kid, he's 30-0 now. Guys, they attracted 12,000 people to come watch him in Omaha, Nebraska. So that, to me, that's flattering to me. I'm just, Midwest boxing fans, they can be amazing, and we can fill these stadiums. So it's amazing to see Terrence Crawford bringing in a crowd like that in its hometown. And I like Terrence Crawford, guys. I think he's one of the most talented guys at 140, even up to 147, I think. That display that he put on, guys, honestly, if they make the Pacquiao-Terrence Crawford fight right now, I consider Terrence Crawford a heavy favorite, and that's my honest opinion as a fighter, as an expert analyst. I consider Terrence Crawford a heavy favorite if he fought Manny Pacquiao in his very next fight, and I think they know that. But I also think that Terrence Crawford is gaining a lot of steam on the big time, pay-per-view status that's for everybody out there. He's been headlining these HBO cards for a while now. I think it's time for him to step up to a big-time pay-per-view fight, and let's give him his coming. And if he fights Manny Pacquiao, you guys, we could see a big-time pay-per-view star because a Manny Pacquiao-Terrence Crawford fight, not only would it sell, it would just be a big-time fight, and it would be explosive. I would not be shocked to see somebody get knocked out in that fight. I genuinely wouldn't. And to see some blood and guts and Manny Pacquiao, Terrence Crawford. Who would have thought we'd have ever said that and got excited about it? Like it's amazing, and I would love to see that. I think Terrence Crawford is a great guy. I think Terrence Crawford, hardworking, talented dude, deserves everything coming his way. He absolutely obliterated Molina. We expected that, we did, but he still impresses me, guys. He just does. I mean, I was watching some of those punches, some of those body punches that he was landing on Molina. I was cringing, and it's just he's amazing. I know I'm gushing, but he's amazing, and I want everything good that's coming to Terrence Crawford. And I just love it, and I love the fact that I was in the ring with him. I fought him as a professional, and I went the distance, and I still brag about this because I did. I went the distance with him and lost on points on like 5 days' notice. So it's always going to be my claim to fame right now. And if he knocks out Manny Pacquiao or even fights Manny Pacquiao, good for him. Yeah, he deserves it, guys.
Riz, what about Joshua? He's going to fight Klitschko. Is he ready for that?
You know what? To me, this is probably the most interesting heavyweight fight I can remember in years. Right? This is very, in some ways, similar to the Pacquiao-Crawford fight. It's the passing of the torch, or could be the passing of the torch. Where I think for Vladimir, I mean, he's been out of the ring for all of 2016. He was a guy he was probably one of the most active fighters over the last decade. Usually he was fighting minimum 2 to 3 times a year. I think the exception was maybe the Hay fight, but that was never his fault. And most of this year wasn't his fault either, up until a recent injury. I really want to see what kind of fighter Vladimir shows up in, because his last performance, he obviously did not look good. He has other things on the go. He's at that age where he's 40. His wife had was battling postpartum depression, and so we don't know where his head actually is. For Joshua, this is what's going to make him go from a good prospect kind of fighter to a international superstar. Has that potential, because if he's able to stop Vladimir, that's the passing of the torch. Now, if Vladimir is able to win, right? Vladimir's already cleaned out the division for 10 years running. Whether you like the Klitschko brothers or not, you can't deny what he's done, and no one has. I mean, with the exception of Mayweather, no one's really been as dominant. But Vladimir still cleaned out his division. If he's able to beat Joshua, who's essentially the heir apparent to the next era, and he can retire on that note, I think you're gonna have to reconsider his place in terms of where he is on the all-time greats, because there's so many guys he beat that were came in out of shape, yada yada, and that's no fault of his own. Those is just that's the way guys showed up. But Joshua's not like that. Joshua is a really well-schooled, polished fighter who every time we see him, he looks incredible. And Deontay Wilder's been a little inactive for himself lately, and a lot of people thought Wilder and Joshua was going to happen, or even Joshua and Luis Ortiz. That's what we thought. And Ortiz has kind of really slipped up his last couple fights. He doesn't look like he's the same fighter. So I thought we would have seen Ortiz first against Joshua to kind of set him up. But I mean, Joshua's right away going for the big guns, and it's going to be in England, and it just shows the kind of the kind of fighter Joshua is, because a lot of fighters would have been like, no, we're just going to wait for him to retire and then we'll take his belt. No, but he wants to send Vladimir into retirement. And there's a mutual respect there that you saw in the ring, where both guys kind of know what they're up against. Vladimir is going to be that old school veteran, and Joshua could be that young up and comer. I'm very excited for this fight, and this is the most intriguing heavyweight fight I can remember in years. I mean, Klitschko and Hay was entertaining in terms of the build up and all that, and because Hay talked a lot. But I mean, in terms of who's going to win the fight, I think most people thought Vladimir would. I think people in this fight really don't know what's going to happen, because I think either guy can be knocked out with any shot. That's the beauty of the heavyweight division, but also when it comes to two amazingly strong, powerful fighters.
This is the Ringside Boxing Show from Monterey, California, streaming worldwide right now, RadioMonterey.com. Stan Martinyouk is going to join us in about 5 minutes. He's joined our broadcast right now, and we will. John will be talking to him in about 5 minutes from now. John, Abner Mares, man, he's been written off a couple times, but he pulled off the upset last night. Got a split decision over Jesus Cuellar. It probably shouldn't have even been a split decision. Mares is back, man.
Yeah, that was really. That's another one of those boxing stories that I love. When a guy is written off, he says, No, don't write me off. I'm 31 years old. That doesn't mean I'm done. And everyone's like, yeah, you're right, done. You're done. And Mares really looked good. He was sharp. He was nailing Cuellar with left hooks. He was beating him to the punch. He was moving good. I mean, I don't know how much credit to give Robert Garcia, but whatever it was, Abner Mares was reborn last night, and it was good to see. I've always liked Abner Mares because he always comes to fight. He's always in shape. He's a credit to the game. He gives it everything he's got. We all remember, of course, that great fight he had with Leo Santa Cruz. Mares is just, he's kind of a throwback. And every time I watch him fight, I always think how perfect he would have been back in the Olympic in the 1970s, and he would have sold that place out every time he fought. And he's from, Southern California, obviously. So I was really happy for him. And Kenny Bayless, who I know, or no, Kermit Bayless against Kermit and the Twin. I don't know what he was watching. When they said split decision and it was 115 to 112, I went, I was stunned because I thought Mares won that fight. Not handily, obviously. It was a good competitive fight, but I thought he won it. I thought he won like 116 to 112, maybe 117 to 111. I wasn't scoring it, but they're just watching it like that, like a fan this time for once, instead of having to write about it. I just thought he looked dynamic, and he knocked Cuellar down, and he did everything. And I was just very happy for him because I think, you know, Virgil Hunter used to train him, and he's a good guy. He's a good fighter. He's a good family man, and it was just a good. Again, I love it when a guy that is written off shows us all. We think we know so much. He shows us, nope, I still got a lot in the tank, and he showed it.
Okay, Travis, last word. Anything else you wanted to say about the weekend?
Yeah, real fast, there was the Andy Ruiz fight over there against Joseph Parker in New Zealand, and I watched this fight, and Andy Ruiz is not a bad heavyweight, guys. It's crazy to say that because he doesn't look like $1 million at all. I'm not that down on Joseph Parker. It wasn't his best performance, but Andy Ruiz is a tough guy. He's a really slick, agile boxer, and it made him look kind of bad, I think. I watched up to like 8 rounds of that fight, and I couldn't finish the rest because it was kind of boring. But just to give Joseph Parker a little bit of wherever the lacking is, he's not a bad fighter. He just fought a really good fighter, a tough fighter, Andy Ruiz. And the future, I think, is still bright for Joseph Parker. Can he beat any of the top guys like Deontay Wilder or Vladimir Klitschko or Anthony Joshua? I don't know. I don't think so. But he's still an undefeated guy, and now he's a champion, I believe. So he's still got a little bit going for him.
I think Parker...
again, boxing is amazing.
Sorry, Travis, go ahead.
Go ahead. Nope, I'm done.
I said I agree with you. I think Parker is one of those guys. I think he's like a good athlete, but if he was struggling with a guy like Andy Ruiz, who's one of those guys who's just horribly out of shape but still pretty talented, I can't see him being a Klitschko, a Joshua, a Wilder. I mean, he was getting hit with shots that, you know, if it was any of those other guys, he'd be knocked out. So it seems like it's one of those things where I see there's the top tier of new heavyweights, and then there's guys like Parker who are that B+ level, and I don't think if he struggled against Ruiz, I can't see him. I know John's big on him, but I can't see him beating any of the top guys.
That's Travis
Hartman. I got called out. Let me say this. Let me say this real fast, Dennis. Yeah, I was pretty disappointed in a way too. I don't think Joseph Parker did enough in the fight. I thought he should have let his hands go more. But I think he's got talent, you know, and he's quick. He throws triple jabs. Roy Jones was talking about how he stole some of his style a little bit, which was kind of funny when I watched the rebroadcast. Funny, when I watched the live, I was kind of disappointed. I watched it again, and I thought, well, you know, he didn't look great, but he didn't look bad either. He won. Close fight, but he won it. But the thing is real fast, is you want a guy to get better, and I'm just concerned that maybe Joseph Parker has plateaued here a little bit. Unlike a Terrence Crawford, unlike an Anthony Joshua, who seemed to be getting better and better with each fight, it looked like yesterday that Joseph Parker is not getting better, and that concerns me.
Travis Hartman, Rizwaan Zahid, and John J. Raspanti are our expert analysts. They are with us every week. We didn't have much time today, but, man, we hit a lot of stuff. Thank you, guys. Excellent job. And John J. Raspanti is going to take over in just a second. We've got Nigel Collins, Hall of Fame scribe, coming up in about 10 minutes, so stay with us from that. John, take us away and introduce us to our next guest.
All right. Stan the Man Martinyouk, who I've known quite a long time, has compiled a record of 16-2 as a professional. He recently completed training with the man I was just discussing and the man we were just raving about, Terrence Crawford, and hopes to be back. Now, he was going to be back in the ring on Friday, December 16th, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But Stan's going to be back in January, so that's the plan. So how you doing today, Big Stan?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. Just doing a little shopping, but enjoying my weekend and enjoyed the fights last night.
Yeah, well, you read my mind. That's what I was going to ask you. Now, you worked with Terrence Crawford for a number of weeks, right? And you trained with him and you sparred with him, and he dominated Joshua-Mollina last night. I mean, it wasn't that much of a surprise, but I wanted to get your take on that performance from Terrence Crawford last night in his victory over Joshua-Mollina.
I think he did very well. I mean, he's a very intelligent fighter, and you know, a lot of people, you know, saw it as it was an easy fight for Terrence, but people got to understand, Joshua-Mollina is not an easy fighter to fight against. He has a very awkward style, and he's big, and he throws a lot of bombs. Terrence was just in really good shape. He trained really hard. He did really good in sparring, and he was able to control the fight and use his footwork and pick him apart. I thought he did very well. It was an excellent job last night by Terrence.
Yeah, when we met a few days ago, I was talking that you had the unique experience of sparring with Joshua-Mollina also, so you know his style pretty good. Yeah. You know how strong John is, and he was really he was staying very close to Terrence, trying to land those big punches, and so the footwork that Terrence Crawford was showing. I mean, you sparred or you fought Terrence Crawford as an amateur, correct?
That is correct. Yes, he has good footwork. I thought Joshua-Mollina had close to the right game plan, what he should have, what he wanted to do, but he just wasn't doing what he needed to do. You know what I mean? Like he didn't cut off the ring. I see that he wanted to put the pressure on Terrence and get on the inside with Terrence and then let his hands go, but he just wasn't cutting off the ring. Terrence is a very intelligent fighter, so he knows how to, move around his opponent and control his opponent with his jab, his footwork, and he switches as well, so that makes it a lot more difficult as well.
Yeah, and your style is moving around the ring. I mean, a number of times I've seen you fight, and you move left to right. You got good lateral movement. You have people oohing and awing at your speed and everything. And Terrence Crawford has that same ability. Now, you said Joshua-Mollina didn't cut off the ring, and I was curious about that. Now, he knew what to expect. Why do you think that was? Do you think it's possible that they didn't prepare for Terrence's ability to move around, or did he just not do what he had planned to do?
I think what he envisioned, maybe what they practiced in camp, was a little bit different when he went into the ring with Terrence. Because it looks one way from the outside of what you can do, but when you get in the ring with Terrence on the inside, when you're face to face with him, it's a completely different story. It's a lot harder than what it looks. Yeah, I'm sure. Now, when you fought, just for a second, when you fought Terrence Crawford in the amateurs, now that was a number of years ago, so you've seen him improve. Did you think he was going to be as good as he is now when you fought him back so many years ago? Yeah, I mean, he's gotten better than what he was in the amateurs. He's gotten a lot better, a lot more intelligent. But yeah, you could tell back then that he was going to be a really good fighter. Interesting. Now, you also trained with Manny Pacquiao, and now you train with Manny Pacquiao and Terrence Crawford, and these are really two talented guys. Correct. How much does that help you as a fighter to, and we discussed this, and you're in there sparring with them. It improves you as a fighter, right, to be working out with those guys, because you got to bring your A game, obviously, because they're going to, and if you hang in there with them and compete, that's got to help your confidence a lot, right? Big time. I mean, when I go into training camps, I don't know how these other fighters go into training camps, but I don't go in there as a sparring partner. I don't go in there as a punching bag and make them look good. I go in there to work on myself as well. So I've learned a lot when I went to the camp with Manny Pacquiao, and then I learned even more when I went with Terrence Crawford, because we trained 3 times a day, we sparred, and we lived together, so we were able to talk about certain things that we were doing against each other in the ring, and we were very competitive as well. So we wanted to, best each time that we sparred each other, and we wanted to get the better of each other. So we're very competitive, and that right there, gives me a lot of confidence. And when I go in the ring, in my fights, I know I'm going to be a lot more relaxed, a lot more wise, and know what I'm going to do. Yeah, let's talk about your career, Stan. I mean, you have a while ago you weren't fighting as much, but in 2016 you had 2 fights. Joe Goosen was a trainer. You worked with Virgil Hunter, who always speaks very highly of you. You got an impressive record. When we were talking a few days ago, you won, lost, very debatable, and I actually agree with you on that. You're 16-2. And you've been fighting in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and tell me about your next fight is probably going to be in January, right? And probably going to be in Wisconsin. Is that correct? Well,
It's still not sure about. I mean, I still may be fighting this Friday. Friday, but it's still possible. It's up with. I won't really know until maybe tonight or tomorrow, for sure. Because the guy that's setting up the fights right now, he was in Manchester, England with Luis Ortiz, and so right now he's actually flying back. So he should be flying back in tonight or tomorrow morning. I'm not exactly sure. So once he gets back, he will let me know for sure if we're fighting or not. If we don't fight on the 15th or on the 16th, then we'll be back in the ring either the 30th or January 7th, one or the other.
I see.
So
okay, that's good.
Hopefully the sooner the better, because I've been training. I'm in tip-top shape right now. I'm in great shape, and I'm ready to get back in the ring. I'm just anxious. It's been a while. My last fight was in June. But I've been active with sparring, and I'm coming off of a good training camp with Terrence Crawford. As you saw, he performed very well in his fight, and I felt like I've trained with him, and I got in really tremendous shape, and I'm looking to put on a show my next fight. And after that, right now I'm unknown in the boxing world. A lot of people haven't really seen my style or haven't heard too much about me. I'm sure they heard my name mentioned here and there, but they haven't really seen me fight in action. But I feel like once I get a fight or two more and then get that TV opportunity and fight a big name, I think I'm going to impress a lot of people. I think I'm going to do very well once I move up in competition and on the big stage.
Yeah, that's right. We were talking about that too. 2017 is going to be a big year for you, right? You've got plans to fight for the USBA title, and so tell us a little bit about that. Yeah, that's the goal, right? Next is the USBA title.
Well, yeah, that's a plan that we have right now. We're looking to get one more 8-rounder and then move up to capture the USBA title, fight for the USBA, and that right there should open a lot of doors for me. And hopefully we'll land a shot against one of the named contenders. And I think I'll do very well. I've competed. I've been in the ring with. I know sparring is different than fights, but I've done very well against top level competition and sparring. And I think I'll do very well in the ring as well against named guys in the junior welterweight division.
Yeah, okay, the last comment here, Stan. Tell the figures. You said a lot of people don't know you. I think in the Bay Area we certainly do, but tell them what they can expect, because, none of your fights are boring. I mean, you might move around a little bit, but you bang. You get in the pocket and fire. Is that what you would tell the fans? Look, you're going to be there and you're going to fight.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say I don't look like a fighter, the way that my look is and how I dress and stuff like that, but they don't know what to expect when they see me, but when I get in the ring, there's going to be a lot of speed, a lot of quickness, a lot of sharp punching. I'm going to be able to pick my opponents apart, break him down, and then take him out in the later rounds. I had hand problems earlier in my career. My hands have healed, so I'm able to sit down and work a little bit on power, and I'm looking to impress a lot of people and get my name out there. I think I have a fan-friendly style, so.
Yes, you do. All right, that's Stan the Man Martinyouk. He's going to be fighting here possibly in a few days, or he's going to be back a few weeks later, but Stan is on the rise, and he's going for it, and this is 2017 is going to be his year, and we'll be watching him on the Ringside Boxing Show. Stan, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Take care, and good luck in your next fight.
Thank you so much, and make sure you guys follow my career. World champion in the making. Thank you, guys.
Today's featured guest on the Ringside Boxing Show was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 2015 in the Observers category, honoring a career that spans 4.5 decades as a boxing journalist. Nigel Collins did a couple of different stints as editor of the Ring magazine, and also has served as editor of Boxing Illustrated, Ring Almanac, KO, and World of Boxing. He is the author of Boxing Babylon, Beyond the Shadowy World of the Prize Ring, and he's currently a columnist for ESPN.com and Boxing News, and a social media and content provider for ESPN2's Friday Night Fights. Nigel, thanks for joining us today on the Ringside Boxing Show. How are you, sir?
Oh, it's my pleasure, Dennis. I'm always happy to talk boxing.
Great. Well, we wanted to have you on today because you've got a perspective on boxing that goes back about 45 years in a professional capacity, and really even farther than that in your lifetime. I read that your love for the sweet science actually dates back to stories that your father and grandfather used to tell you about boxing when you were in England, when you were born and raised there. What are your memories of that?
Well, I was born into a boxing family. Both my grandfather and my father were big boxing fans, and I grew up with boxing talk around the house. I thought it was normal. I thought everybody was like this. But yes, I really didn't have much of a chance not to like boxing when the two male role models that I lived with were big boxing fans. It was funny. One of my earliest memories, period, was my grandfather telling me stories about boxers from his youth. Bob Fitzsimmons was one he talked about because his family was from Cornwall, which was where Bob Fitzsimmons was born.
Oh, okay.
And he talked a lot about when Fitzsimmons beat Jim Corbett for the title, and he also the old bare knuckle fighter Jem Mace. My grandfather was a big fan of him too. So it was, it was just part of my upbringing, and I'm happy it was because it opened up a whole world for me.
Who was your dad's favorite fighter? Was it Henry Cooper back then?
No, I think from his youth it would have been Freddie Mills,
the
light heavyweight champion. He told me this story once. Freddie Mills fought a fight at the end of the war, just when they were allowed to have outdoor fights again. And, of course, he was in the Air Force at the time, but they allowed him to fight, and my father went AWOL to go see the fight. So he was a pretty serious boxing fan,
wow. Too. No kidding. Well, I'm almost 64, and my dad came out of the Great Depression, and my impression is that the men who fought 40, 50, 60 years ago were really a different kind of person, a different breed, because life seemed a lot harder in those days when my dad was growing up. People survived the hard times of the Depression and a couple of pretty horrifying wars, among other things. There are a lot of boxing historians who believe the fighters from those generations were better, not only as technicians, but also as warriors. And I'm wondering where you come down on that argument, how you think the fighters of today compare to the guys from back then.
Well, from the point of view of how the boxers thought about it was very different. Back then it was a job.
Yeah.
You lost a fight. If it was a good fight, you could fight the same guy a couple of weeks from then. It wasn't like the end of the world when you lost. But the boxers today are more like entrepreneurs. They want to build up a record and cash in, and of course the best of them stay around. But certainly, in industrialized countries such as the United States and the UK and a lot of Europe, everybody's getting a lot more money now than they ever did. I mean, as far as the top fighters are concerned, today is the good old days as far as, the size of the purses. As far as the quality of the fighters, I think the best of today would have been able to compete in any era, and I think in many ways the best of today are better fighters. They don't fight as often. They take more easy fights today. But the cream of the crop today, I think, was as good as any era. And, of course, boxing has changed a lot. You look at the real old-timers, it was, throw a haymaker and clinch. Boxing has evolved stylistically, and as far as the mindset of the boxers goes, it's developed. But I don't think we can say, that today's fighters would never been able to, stand up 50 years ago against the best. I think the best then and the best now would have competed on equal terms.
So when you see somebody like Golovkin and remember guys like Hagler and Carlos Monzon, you see a fair fight.
Triple G is obviously a hot fighter right now. And he seems to be, one of the very best around. And I enjoy watching him fight. But he doesn't have the track record of the people you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's an old cliche in boxing. It's not how many guys you beat, it's who you beat. And obviously the business was better and different back, when Hagler and Leonard was fighting and all those guys. They wanted to fight the best. Enough money was found to make the matches on a much more frequent basis than it is today. I think it was helpful that there were a lot of more good fighters. And as the number of titles grew and the whole thing became very watered down, that changed everything as well. But, we all tend to think that the music from our youth was the best of all time. And it's the same with the fighters. You know, however old you are, the fighters you watched when you were in your salad days, in your mind, they're the best. But really, I think the best of any era could compete after, say, like the 1940s, because the techniques have changed. I think today, put aside guys like Floyd Mayweather Jr., most of the fighters were better defensively and not as good offensively as they are today.
Okay, well, speaking about the music of our youth, when I watch a video of Ali against, for example, Cleveland Williams or Ernie Terrell, and I try to picture him taking on any other heavyweight of my lifetime, I don't think it's a fair fight. I think Ali on his best night embarrasses any other heavyweight I've ever watched on his best night, all the way up to the 240-pound giants that are fighting today. Where do you rank Ali all time?
Well, I flip back and forth between Ali and Joe Louis.
Okay.
I think they're quite a notch ahead of everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a guy like Joe Louis with a great punch would have had a good chance. But he had trouble with guys like Tommy Farr and Billy Conn, who were movers.
Yep.
So stylistically, I think Ali would be able to beat Joe Louis if they were both in their prime. But with that punch, of course, Joe always had a great chance. But you could take some other fighters, from the current era, and I think Joe Louis would be able to beat them. A Mike Tyson, a Sonny Liston, a Mike Tyson. I said Mike Tyson already, but Rocky Marciano was, beat Joe Louis, but it was the ghost of Joe Louis. I think Joe Louis could beat a lot of contemporary fighters, probably anybody that's fighting right now, regardless of his size.
You were a close observer of the Philadelphia fight scene in the 1970s, I think, which I think a lot of modern-day fight fans are really unfamiliar with. They just don't know what it was like there. What kind of fight town was Philly when you were there back then? Well,
it was great. I mean, the 70s were the last golden era of Philadelphia boxing. Not as far as the boxers are concerned. We still produce a good number of good boxers, but in those days, most of the money came from the ticket sales. And that gave the promoters, a different mindset. You had to have good fights or people wouldn't come. Today, with so much money from sponsorship, television, and the deals you make, I'll let my top fighter fight if you let this other guy fight on the card, that kind of stuff. It was different then. You had to make good fights or nobody was going to come and you wouldn't make any money. So promoters went out of their way to make good fights. And I think, some of it was luck. I mean, the most exciting fighter in Philadelphia that era was Matt Franklin or Matthew Saad Muhammad. Mm-hmm. I mean, I covered probably all of his Philadelphia fights. He never defended the title in Philadelphia up until, he became the champ, and then he fought all over. Those were amazing. I mean, it was like his fights. I don't know if you've ever seen tapes of them, but there was hardly a fight he had where he didn't get the crap beat out of him before he rallied back. Mm-hmm. His first fight with Marvin Johnson, the guy he eventually won the WBC title off, the first fight was in Philadelphia at the Spectrum. And I'm being honest when I say this, I was watching the fight. I thought both of them were going to die. And it was a tremendous struggle. I mean, first one guy, then the other. You don't see like stuff like that very often anymore, certainly not at the top level. And here's a little story. After the fight, it had been such a grueling fight, the promoter, Russell Peltz, went with somebody else to check on Marvin Johnson, see if he was doing okay. And they went to his hotel, and when they got to the room, there was Marvin Johnson collapsed outside in the hallway. So they rushed up, they took him in the room, they thought he was seriously injured or something like that. It turned out that he was too tired to turn the key.
Oh, man. Oh,
yeah.
My God.
Where his minders were, I don't know, probably having a drink. But, yeah, I mean, that sort of stuff was regular fare with Matthew Said Muhammad. And then, of course, we had all those great middleweights. Benny Briscoe was the king of them. And there were young, smaller fighters, like Tyrone Everett was a great fighter. So we had an embarrassment of riches during the 70s
Jeff Chandler.
in Philadelphia. Yeah, Jeff Chandler, he's one of my favorites.
Yep,
he might have been the best of that lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that Jeff Chandler had, I think, 3 amateur fights.
Really? No, I did not know that. Oh,
and I don't know if you've heard the stories, but he would go to the promoter, like Russell Peltz was his promoter, and he'd make a fight, and he'd say, well, you want to fight this guy? Oh, no, get me somebody better than that.
Huh.
He was embarrassed to fight the stiffs. So who do you hear that from today? They talk a lot about it, but do they mean it? Probably not. Certainly when they become established, they're looking for the easy paydays. They say we want to fight the best, but there's a lot of arm twisting that goes on before that actually happens.
What was it like to watch a fight at the Blue Horizon? Was that place pretty special?
It was. It was probably the best fight venue I've ever been to, and I've been to a few. One of the great things about it was that there was a balcony all the way around. And the long side, not the ends, but the long sides, if you were sitting in the middle of the balcony, you could literally, if you wanted to, jump into the ring. And for many, many years, the tickets were first come, first served. And those balcony seats everybody knew that they were the best, not down at ringside, the front couple of rows of the balcony. And they would gather in the lobby before the door was open. And then when the door was open, it was like the Oklahoma land rush. Everybody was storming upstairs, tripping, falling down. It was like unbelievable. It was like Black Friday, and they just opened the doors. And people would race to get those good seats. Later, when the Tuesday night fights came there on a regular basis, they were selling out before the fight was even announced sometimes. So they started numbering the seats, and they didn't have the rush up the stairs anymore. But that was something to see. I mean, we used to laugh about it. If you stood at the snack bar on the second level, and then you would see them make the turn, go down the hallway, and go up the final flight of stairs to the balcony. It was amazing. Some of them were like, guys our age, but they wanted those seats. So the Blue Horizon was a very special place. It's had seats for about 1,200 people, but there were times when they had close to 2,000 in there, and it was scary. I thought the balcony was going to collapse many times. During those fights, it took you half an hour to get to the bathroom and back to your seat. That's how bad it was. I mean, good for the promoter, but it had a special atmosphere, and I think maybe the closeness of the fans to the action spurred the fighters on. It wasn't a very big ring. You could hear a comment that a fan made at the furthest seat away from the ring. So I think the venue itself was conducive to pushing the fighters even harder than they would have been elsewhere.
This is the Ringside Boxing Show from Monterey, California. I'm Dennis Taylor. We're talking to International Boxing Hall of Famer Nigel Collins, and we are streaming worldwide right now at radiomonterey.com. Nigel, if you had a time machine and could revisit any era of boxing, where would you go?
I know the answer right away. I'd go back to the bare knuckle era.
Really?
Of course, there's no films of that. Very few photographs. It's usually illustrations. Sometimes the guys were there, sometimes they weren't, but they illustrated it anyway. Yeah, I think that was a very, very interesting, especially during the Regency period. And, 6 or 7 fights was a lot of fights back in those days. It was such a brutal affair. But, I would really like to go back and see the great bare-knuckle fighters. I come from Bristol in England, so I was born, and there were 3 bare-knuckle champions in a row from Bristol, and one of them, Hen Pierce, or the Game Chicken, was undefeated. He died from tuberculosis and alcohol. He still held the championship. Gully was another one. It was those guys fascinate me. There's a move underway now to have a new statue built of Bendigo to put in Nottingham, and he was undefeated. No, he lost once on a foul, but he never really lost. He was a real character. He was an all-round athlete. He could do somersaults. He used to enter races, walking. You name it, he could do it. And he was one of the guys that moved the style forward. He was an evasive fighter. He was a left-hander, and he was a very colorful character. He became a preacher after several years as an alcoholic. After he retired, he was in jail like 20-something times for being drunk. Turned his life around and became a evangelistic preacher of all things. So I think those guys are fascinating. I have all the copies of Boxiana, where there are these very colorful descriptions of the fights. That's where I would go with the time machine.
When you look back on all your years in the sport, who are the most memorable characters you ever ran across? Not just fighters, but cornermen or promoters or newspapermen. Tell us a story. Who would Damon Runyon have loved from back in the day?
Well, I think obviously on the current fighters, Bernard Hopkins. He's a guy that you ask him one question and he talks for 20 minutes. He's a very interesting person. And as far as his boxing knowledge goes, he's a genius. We ran a thing in the Ring magazine that I started for several years. I have no idea whether it's still going on, but it was called Perfect Execution, and it was Bernard Hopkins giving boxing lessons. So we would find a date that was convenient, and I would go with a writer and a photographer and supervise this thing. We would try to get maybe 4 or 5 at one shoot so he didn't have to keep doing it all the time. And I learned more from him, because he would narrate as he's doing it, from watching him in the gym do all this stuff that I have at, sitting ringside for decades before that. So I think Damon Runyon would like him, because he's such an interesting character. Lou Duva, he was like the Lou Albano of boxing,
Yeah, Lou Albano.
I did an interview with Vinny Paz fairly recently because his movie came out and all, and we were talking about the fight where Vinny challenged Roger Mayweather for the junior welterweight title. Vinny had a lot of trouble making weight, and Mayweather handled him with ease. But when the fight was over, Lou Duva did one of those things that he was famous for. He flipped out and rushed towards the other corner. But usually, one of the other guys would grab him. It was sort of like one of those hold me back deals. Well, that night, nobody held him back. He went charging over towards Roger, and Roger decked him with a right hand. Cut him. But, stuff like that, that's nobody... He didn't get any trouble for that. The guy charges you with a bad look in his eyes. Yeah, you're allowed to defend yourself. Vinny Paz is a character too. He's a really wild and crazy guy. As far as I don't know, it's just so many. It's hard to pin it down. I find boxers' personality fascinating. I remember when Hagler first started coming to Philadelphia, where he sort of earned his bones. I went out to dinner one night with the promoter, Russell Peltz, Hagler, and it was one of the Petronelli brothers. I can't remember which one it was. And we sat down, had a very nice meal. We were together an hour and a half or so, and Hagler hardly said a word. He just had this, tough guy persona, and he wasn't going to crack it. Years later, I have a daughter. When she was, I guess she was in elementary school. It used to bother her a lot that I would spend a lot of time in a room typing instead of giving her attention. So one day I said, I got to finish this story. Here's a magazine with a picture of Marvin Hagler on it. Draw the picture of Hagler. So she did. She drew this childish drawing of Hagler. You could sort of tell who it was. And I mailed it to him. And he wrote back the most beautiful letter you can imagine. So I saw both sides of him, And that's true for a lot of fighters. They're not the same outside of the ring as they are inside of it, but very often their personality influences the way they fight.
What did you think of Sonny Liston? Did you know him?
I didn't know him. He did live in Philadelphia for a while. He was a cult hero then, and that has grown. I mean, there's more interest now in Sonny Liston than when he was fighting, in a way. He was a rebel. He was an outsider. Yes, he was an ex-con, but he wasn't treated fairly. At one time, he had done some time in prison when he was living, I guess, around St. Louis. I'm not sure where it was. A cop pulled a gun on him and made the mistake of not pulling the trigger, and Sonny broke his arm. So not the other stuff he was doing. He was like a union goon kind of guy. Mm-hmm. But the fact that he'd broke a cop's arm was sort of like spread. When he moved to Philadelphia, every patrol car in Philadelphia had a picture of Sonny Liston on their visor. And they went after him for everything, driving too slow. They just harassed him continually. And you might have heard the story when he won the title for Patterson. He was flying back, and he was in a great mood. He was talking about all the stuff he wanted to do, and as he'd had a very rough upbringing himself, he wanted to help kids, Sonny wasn't a bad guy if he liked you.
Yeah.
And he liked kids, and he was just very, very up. And one of the best boxing writers of all time, a guy called Jack McKinney, went out to Chicago to cover the fight, and was on the plane with Sonny. He was the only writer that Sonny trusted. In fact, Jack McKinney, who was a famous barroom fighter, actually sparred with Sonny Liston. He had phoned ahead to City Hall, tried to talk people, some sort of reception. When he got off the plane in Philadelphia, there was nobody there to meet him from the city or anywhere else. There are a few gawkers who didn't realize he was coming. So when he left Philadelphia, his famous quote was, he was going to Denver, he said, "I'd rather be a lamppost in Denver than the mayor of Philadelphia."
And I grew up in Denver, and when he got to Denver, he changed his mind about that one, too, because the cops were not friendly to him there either.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a lot of that, even worse today, but Sonny was one of those guys that he was controlled by the mob, and he never really got away from them. He had some controversial fights, and but I think the fact, he was in Philadelphia in the 60s, at the beginning of the rise of the counterculture, and, all over, internationally. And it was easy to identify with because he was somebody else that was fighting the establishment. Not quite in the same way people who wanted to end the war in Vietnam or have civil rights for everybody, but still he was a rebel. And that appealed to certain people, people like me. So he's still, this new book just came out about him. You know, it's amazing the interest in Sonny Liston.
Yeah. This is the Ringside Boxing Show from Monterey, California. I'm Dennis Taylor. We're talking to Nigel Collins, former editor of the Ring magazine, 45 years as a boxing scribe. The live portion of our show is about to end, so we want to thank everybody who listened today on the live edition. I'm going to continue with Nigel Collins because I got more questions for him, and we'll put the rest on our podcast. Nigel, did you encounter, you mentioned Liston was mobbed up. Did you ever encounter Blinky Palermo or Frankie Carbo or anybody, or did they predate?
Blinky Palermo came back to Philadelphia after he got out of jail. So he was a sort of the behind-the-scenes guy. He had his finger in the pie when he got out, definitely. He wasn't a front man like he used to be. You know, he tried to keep everything very quiet, but he definitely, he wasn't as powerful as he was before. I mean, you know, but he wasn't out of the game, and he wasn't without influence. And, you know, he died not too long after he got out, but the time he was alive, he was definitely involved in boxing.
Did you go to Manila for the Thrill in Manila?
No, I didn't, but I did go to Manila to give Manny Pacquiao his championship belt after he knocked out Marco Antonio Barrera. And I tell you, that is one of the most unusual places I've ever been to. Right now, there's some real bad stuff going on there. You probably know about it. But I tell you, when I wrote about it, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way. I said that when you step off the plane in the Philippines, it's like stepping off of a plane into a comic book. Everything is wildly exaggerated in a way. It's a really great country. I had a lot of fun there. I was treated like royalty. The actual presentation of the belt took place in the presidential palace with the president right up there on stage with me. Everybody wanted to be Manny's friend, especially the politicians, because there was an election coming up. And, you know, so boxing in the Philippines, you know, it's ingrained part of the culture, you know, and they have a lot of good boxers still, besides Manny Pacquiao, but he took it to a height internationally that it never reached before. Flash Lordy certainly came to the United States and fought. That was a pretty big deal, but you know, nothing like Pacquiao was in his prime.
Those of us who love boxing and write about boxing, we often get a question from others that I find really hard to answer. They want to know, how do we justify a sport that's known to inflict so much damage on people? And, you know, how can we look at Ali and Bobby Chacon and Terry Norris and countless others and not condemn the sport? And my answer to them always feels a bit incomplete, but it has to do with the fact that boxers just genuinely love what they do. They live to be prize fighters. And when their career ends, it's so hard for them to accept. And I've met very few fighters who, whether they're irreparably injured or not, wouldn't do it all over again if they got the chance. It's not cockfighting. It's not dogfighting. So this is what I tell these people, that these guys love their sport. How do you talk to people about boxing and your love for the game in the context of the damage these guys inflict upon each other?
Well, I've heard the same thing as you have from boxers. I mean, and it is a truism. I mean, there's some that might regret it, but, you know, even the ones that are badly damaged, as you say. Yeah. Like you also said, this is our identity. That's who they are. I don't really think you can make an excuse. We've all sold our souls to the devil following this sport. You know, it's like, hey, it is like a drug. You get addicted. Once you're in, you don't get out. That's the truth. But I made some references to some of the things I think about boxing when I was inducted into the Hall of Fame. In fact, the speech is online on YouTube. And what I told the people, much to the chagrin of some of the people, I said, you know, the world is divided up into two groups, prey and predator. And human beings are predators, and that we wouldn't have survived from the caveman days up until today if we weren't tough, mean son of a bitches. Mm-hmm. We'd have been eliminated. And that's so deeply ingrained in our DNA that you're never going to get rid of it. You can't breed thousands of years. I don't think we're civilized now. Look what's going on around the world, you know. So I think that boxing is the most noble way to express this side of our personality. Everybody has that violence in them somewhere. You know, it'll come out if need be. So I think that we can't escape who we are, but we can channel this aggression and violence into more civilized ways than killing people with bombs and bullets. And I think boxing is the best way to do that. And there is a terrible price for it. Because of my job, I've had lots of young men come and ask me about becoming boxers. I tell all of them, you don't do it. You know, you're going to get brain damaged. I don't know how many I talked out of it. I would never try to discourage. Because if you're going to ask me that question, you shouldn't be a boxer. It's like you say. That's their life. That's who they are. And when you take that away from them, they're lost. Yeah. And if somebody told me tomorrow, you can't write another story, you know? You can't make another documentary for TV. What the hell am I going to do? Yep. What would you do if they said to you, you can't have a podcast anymore? Yep. So I think it is just the best and most noble way to express the violent side of mankind.
Talking to Nigel Collins on the Ringside Boxing Show. Nigel, you and some other folks, including our friend Matt Podgorski, who's been on this show a couple times, came up with a new way to rank fighters, the Transnational Boxing Rankings Board. For decades, the Ring magazine was the final word on rankings. How were the Ring rankings determined when you were there, and why did you guys see a need for a better way?
Well, actually, the Ring magazine invented rankings. Did you know that?
I did not, no.
Yes, back shortly. In fact, the first person to make up the rankings that were published in Ring magazine was Jack Dempsey.
Wow.
Yeah, true. So there were lots of different ways that it was done over the years. After a while, the editorial staff of the Ring took over and doing it themselves instead of a personality. And of course, sometimes they were good, sometimes they were bad. What I did in my second term as the editor of the Ring, the Ring belt had fallen into disuse under previous owners. And it was given away for Fighter of the Year, and I think one was given for whoever was pound for pound. But the champions weren't given belts anymore. I'm not sure why, because I wasn't there when it happened. So I bought the belt back, and at the same time had a panel. A lot of them were our writers. Some of them weren't. Barry McGuigan was on the panel, where they could send their suggestions for the rankings via email. I mean, since the digital age, it's much easier to do. And even though we would make the final decision, we had advice from some of the best boxing brains in the world. And obviously, there was no payoffs. In fact, if you got time, a quick story here.
Sure.
Because ESPN supported us, it gained quite a bit of traction. And at one time after it got going, and you could see the fighters in the ring with their ring belts and all, and they would mention it sometimes. A promoter called me up, a well-known promoter who I won't name, and started talking about using our rankings with his fighters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and sounded very enthusiastic. I said, wait a minute. I said, I want to tell you something before you get too carried away here. There's no way that we play the game that the alphabets do, where you work your way up through the rankings, whether it's, through merit or through payoffs. and then you become a mandatory, and then eventually you'll get a fight. I said, we don't play that game. You know, we didn't strip fighters. If they, you know, throughout most of boxing history, the champions, their titles weren't stripped. And most of them were honorable men and would fight the best fighters. Yeah, there was some ducking. But, so they were basically the bedrock of the policy was advice from a panel of experts, ranking guys strictly on merit in their division. You know, very often we have a good fighter say he's a welterweight, and he was maybe a champion, maybe he was high in the rankings, and he moves up to middleweight. We didn't take into consideration what he did as welterweight. We didn't automatically put him in that. When he started beating middleweights, we would. So it was advancement on merit, no stripping, and having a worldwide panel of experts to give us advice. That was, and actually, it's what led to my downfall. When Golden Boy bought the ring, not only were we giving private assurances, it was in every media outlet throughout the world that they were going to give us editorial independence. Oscar said things like, yeah, we'd be wasting our investment if we tried to influence them. Well, for about 5 years, I kept them at bay. And the rankings was one thing that I would get a lot of heat about from the corporate end. But fuck them. I probably wasn't allowed to say that, but hey, the only thing you've got is your reputation. You know, if you're a journalist, you don't have much money.
That's right.
So I wasn't going to sell out after 35, 40 years in the business just because Richard Schaefer wanted me to. You know, so, you know, that's what happens. If you stand up for something you believe in, sometimes you pay the price. So be it, you know. You know, I can't really say how good the ring rankings are now. You know, I wasn't not part of those rankings, but they were created because I left the ring and they knew that there was no credibility anymore. So I really don't have any idea how they are now. But they do seem to be honest rankings, but I don't participate.
Okay. All right. Nigel Collins has chronicled the sport for the past 45 years, which is why he's now in the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Nigel, it's been a pleasure and an honor to chat with you today. Thanks for all you've done for the sport, and thanks again for joining us today on the Ringside Boxing Show.
Anytime. It was fun, man. Bye-bye, Dennis.
All right. Take care. Nigel Collins on the Ringside Boxing Show. That'll do it for us today. Thanks one more time to our expert analysts, Travis Hartman, Rizwaan Zahid, John J. Raspanti. They are with us every week. And another big thanks to Nigel Collins, our guest today, and Stan Martinyouk, who was on during the 10-minute segment of our show. If you missed any part of today's show, it's going to be replayed at 8 p.m. Pacific on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday right here at RadioMonterey.com, and we'll also have it posted by tonight at ringsideboxingshow.com. Listen to us every Sunday right here on RadioMonterey.com at 4 p.m. Pacific. If you're living somewhere on the other side of the world and want to know when we're on in your area, go to ringsideboxingshow.com, the world's best boxing website, where we'll have all the worldwide times listed for you. Thanks, Ringside Nation. We'll see you next Sunday on the Ringside Boxing Show.